Hello, Peter.
Hi. Oh, I can hear you very well. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. How am I coming through?
You're perfect.
Good, lovely. You had a nice start to your week?
Yes, so far, so a lovely sunny day. We're beating Australia in the cricket. So for me, it's a perfect, no more perfect day.
Oh, good, lovely. Um, if you're ready to begin, we'll crack on, shall we?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Well, thank you, Peter, for joining me to talk about your career as a whole. We'll of course focus on a few projects as we go. I think my audience would quite like to know, as a starting point, why you wanted to go into the film business to begin with and how you went about that.
I don't think I had this. I was working in Fleet Street for an Australian newspaper, and it was a very unhappy experience because the Australians didn't want to be here, and in England in those days, and everything was quite angry. And I was working, I doing days and nights, and the other person was a guy called Mike Roberts, who we shared nights and day with. And then Mike saw an advert about Pearl and Dean opening up a studio in London, just outside London, to make commercials, because commercial TV was going to start that year. So we both wrote letters to Pearl and Dean. I got luckily the secretary of the editor of the paper wrote my one, otherwise I would never got a job, and told lots of lies. And a week later, I was in the film industry with no knowledge at all about cameras, film, although I said I had a lot. So it was quite a big learning experience. I was lucky that a couple of people I was working with, my bosses as they were saw through me immediately, but gave me a second chance and looked after me. And later in life, I looked after them, funny enough. But I knew once I'd started working, shooting, that I really enjoyed it. I was a clever boy to start with, obviously, then camera assistant after that. But I loved the whole experience. In between commercials, because it started with lots of commercials, because the ITV was just started, but then it was quiet moments. They rented a studio and asked us to make what were called B films, which were like 1 hour films that went out with the main feature, because in those days you had a main feature, hour and a half, 2 hours, and a B film that was 1 hour, because they had like a 3-hour program for people. So I worked on this B film, which was terrible, but it seemed very exciting because you were doing kind of car chases and fights, and so I thought this is really interesting, and I loved it. And then the studio, Pearl and Dean, kind of closed down a bit because they made a lot of commercials and no one wanted any more for the moment. And I went to the next studio, Walton, where they made TV series, where they made the series, Robin Hood series, which at the time was the most popular TV series ever made, and Lancelot. So they made these TV, and I started working on those. And that was a very good learning experience, because you shot a 1 hour episode every week. So everyone had to be on top of their game, because there were very few chances of going a second chance or a second take. So that was kind of my early career. Then the first time I worked on a big film, a feature film, was I got a call to go to Pinewood Studios, which I'd never been to. Of course, this huge studio, very nerve-wracking. I guess I was like 17, and it's for night work. And I arrived there really scared, and I was told to go on the back lot where they'd built the Titanic, because it was sinking. A Night to Remember, which was the sinking of the Titanic. So it's one of the biggest films that's ever made at the time. So it's night work, winter, cold. I was freezing, so I ran everywhere to try and keep warm, which, funny enough, did me, without me realizing at the time, a lot of good in the future, because Jeffrey Unsworth, who was the DP, a few months later, when they were looking for someone, another a clapper boy, said, well, let's try and find that young man that ran everywhere, you know, which was me. And then I spent the next 25 years basically working with Jeff, you know. And I told him, the reason I was running everywhere, because I was bloody cold and I didn't have there was no anoraks in those days. So, and then I spent, you know, years and years with Jeff, working from a clapper boy up to focus and then to an operator. Then I got my break, excuse me, as second unit director. And our dream was, you know, Jeff and I, that we'd always work together with he as the DP and me as a director, but that was never going to happen, because unfortunately when Jeff did tests with Roman Polanski in France, I was going to visit him the following weekend, and he had a massive heart attack and died. So we never really had that part of our dream come true, you know. But you know, Jeff, even now, is still in many ways with me, because he was very much a father figure for me, and excuse me, made me believe in myself, which at some I really didn't. And so that was that kind of early experience. And with Jeff, I was introduced to, you know, quite a few big directors, famous directors, and you learn a lot then, you know. And also you learn when to keep quiet, which I didn't do at first, and you realize sometimes it's better to rather than just think you have to talk all the time. And so I learned my lesson that way. But it was a marvelous experience. I loved nearly every second of it, to be quite honest.
I mean, were you ever staff, say like permanent staff, or were you always freelance?
I was always freelance. Yeah, when I worked on the Night to Remember, I was basically the only freelance, because all the rest were contract people at rank at Pinewood. So, and you weren't too popular with some of the other, because you came in as a freelance, which meant you got a little bit more money, but of course you only got paid the days you were there, whereas they get paid, you know, 12 months a year, which they didn't seem to understand. So there's a little bit of petty jealousy from some of the other people, but the ones who are important, like Jeffrey and Johnny Alcott, you know, that were great with me, you know, and basically cemented my career, you know.
And I suppose it was a natural progression to go to as a focus puller. And for those that might not know, what is a focus puller?
Okay, so you have two assistants on the feature film camera. You have the clapper boy, which sounds very simple, but the clapper boy looks after the film. So it's quite a responsible job. And an assistant to the focus puller. The focus puller is totally in charge of the running of the camera, the lacing up of the film, and also making sure everything is in focus, because you know, sometimes you have what's called a long lens and not much light. There's only 2 or 3 inches depth of focus, so the focus puller has to be, if it's 7'6" or 8'2", it's got to be right there. Otherwise, the shot is soft, and no one appreciates that. And in those days, you didn't have the reflex cameras, so you never knew if there was a mistake until the following day when you saw rushes. So it was quite a nerve-wracking time. You know, when the reflex camera came in, it was a little less worrying, because the operator could see if it worked or if it didn't work focus-wise, you know, and so that took some of those sleepless nights out of the equation.
Yeah. I was wondering, we mentioned Beckett last time we spoke, but we didn't really talk about any of the key cast. I wonder if you'd had any recollections of Richard Burton, Peter O'Toole, and John Gielgud.
Oh, yes, I have. I mean, firstly, it was amazing to see these two great actors together, and O'Toole was a character, a real character, and we did a big shot on the big stage at Shepperton H stage, which is the biggest stage in Europe, where they had the cathedral built, and he had to walk in from one end to the other, going for his punishment, you know, because and I was on the second camera, but on what they call a long lens, so I was very close on him, and I was terrified, you know, if I would get it wrong out of focus, you know, and I was concentrating like mad. And as Peter O'Toole came out of the shot, he walked right past me, and he said, "How's the cricket doing, Peter?" Because he loved the cricket, and he knew I did. So I was there thinking, it's the end of my career, I might have screwed this up. And he was wondering how much we got against the Australians. So just 1 second. I think my wife is, as always, interrupting. Will you be quiet, please?
That was the scene where he was crying.
He was going to be whipped, punished. Okay, she wasn't even born then, so we won't listen too much. Okay.
And Richard Burton?
Oh, Richard was great. I mean, he at the time, I think his relationship with Elizabeth Taylor had just started, so he was fairly well occupied, and he was he loved life. I mean, he enjoyed a drink. He was still very professional, and of course, he had this great voice. I mean, this marvelous voice that commanded everything, you know, and it was, you know, it was what was nice. Neither he or Peter O'Toole ever played anything big star thing. They were just there doing their job, which, you know, performances, and like any of those real, in my opinion, real kind of stars, actors, actresses, they appreciate the crew as well. And these two really enjoyed the crew, and they knew when shots were difficult, and they did all they could to make it make it work for you, you know. Whereas I've worked with, especially a couple of not very pleasant American actors that didn't care two shits about how difficult it was, and never gave you any kind of second chance, you know. Whereas these type of actors really cared about the crew, and quite right, because it doesn't matter if you do the best performance in the world, if it's out of focus or not framed properly, you know, it's a waste of time. So they understood this and appreciated, you know, how important the crew was.
And lastly, on that one, John Gielgud, what was he like?
I didn't work with John on that. I worked with him later on a film, and he was great. I mean, he was like, he was a proper actor, you know, and he was always you always felt you were dealing with an actor, but he had great presence, and once again appreciated the crew, always tried to make things work for you. And I say so different to, you know, one or two so-called stars that, you know, don't care two shits about the crew. And but John was great, Richard Burton was great, Peter O'Toole. They were just not only very, very good actors, they were pleasant to be around, fun to be around, and cared about you as well as what they were doing, you know.
Yeah. And I must mention Genghis Khan, of course, another fantastic cast. Omar Sharif, James Mason, Eli Wallach, Tay Savalas. Anything that jumps to mind on that one?
Omar Sharif was a pain. He I'm trying to watch the American actor. Steve, who was the American actor?
James Mason?
No, James Mason and Robert Morley were big actors in it. but there was an American actor who was co-star with
Mm.
him, who was
Well, the ones I've got on my notes are obviously Taste of Alice and Eli Wallach. I'm just seeing if there's anybody else that.
yeah, no, there was the bigger star than that in it, at the time.
Let's have a quick.
But that was all okay. I mean, it was quite exciting to do from my point of view when I was quite young then. You do scenes when you have, a couple of hundred horsemen, amongst them probably 50 stuntmen charging at the camera, and so it was a whole new way of working for me. It was very, very exciting, and there was hardly any visual effects in those days, so almost everything you did was done for real. Made it could be fairly, especially with horses, because they're totally unpredictable. If you get 50, 60, 70 charging, what you do, you put the the best stuntman in the first lot of horses, and in the last lot of horses, and in the middle you have the less good horsemen, and that's when the problems often happen. When they lose control, and and the horses freak out a bit. Especially when you have they did a terrible thing in those days. They used to have these wire falls when you have a wire around the front hoofs of a horse, and you gallop and gallop and gallop on the rehearsals, and then when the shot comes, they had this wire put around their hoofs, and if they've been rehearsing galloping 100 yards, but the wire pulls them down at 70 or 80 yards, so they're going full gallop. I mean, it would never be allowed now.
No.
But that was quite terrifying, and I'm sure, I mean, no one ever admitted it, but I'm sure horses were very badly damaged, and certainly a few stuntmen were. But I think, in Yugoslavia, so we had a lot of Serbian stuntmen who were, I'm afraid the American stunt guys didn't treat with, it's almost like they were cannon fodder, If I mean, at the end of a shot, you look around and there'd be bodies everywhere, and you think, you're just hoping that they would start moving quite soon, because you hit the ground at full gallop, and it's not that, it's when the horses behind you can gallop over you, kick you in the head. So there were quite a few accidents, but nothing, luckily, that was ever admitted to that was that serious. But there were arms broken and collarbones and such. But I mean, would never be allowed now, thank God. But then it was, especially when you were working in like Yugoslavia or probably even Spain or Turkey, when you could get away with almost murder.
Was it Stephen Boyd you were thinking of?
Yes, Stephen Boyd, who was lovely. He was really nice man. Whereas Omar Sharif was a bit of a pain.
No.
Stephen was really nice. I mean, I don't think he himself would think he was a great actor, but he had a good look to him, very professional, did a lot of his own stunt work, I don't think he and Omar didn't get on. I think we had a fight when they actually, in the film, it was a long time ago now, but they had a fight. It was in the film, and it got quite serious because there was really a great dislike for each other. And but of course it worked for the film when you have that anger and extra energy goes into it, and so that probably worked. I mean, I haven't seen the film for decades, but and Eli Wallach was great because I remember when we did they said, the next shot will be Eli Wallach's death. So I said, we better put a full roll of film on. And he said to me, I heard that, young man. But I was right, because he took a long time dying.
Well, I think as the best actors do, really, don't they?
Yes, well, they don't. They know once they're dead, they're out.
Yeah.
So they hang on as long as possible.
And then, of course, you progressed to assistant camera on 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
Again, quite a film to be on.
Yeah, I did I didn't do because I'd worked with Jeff Unsworth and Johnny Alcott before that, and then I was the clapper boy. Then I decided I was getting a bit old for that, so I promoted myself to camera assistant, which of course Johnny Alcott was. And so I didn't do that much on the film because they only wanted a second camera now and again. And John was going to, at that time, it didn't look like John Alcott would ever do anything but be a camera assistant. Of course, after that, he got the break and became a cameraman for Kubrick. But at the time, he certainly was never going to be a camera operator. He had no interest in that at all, which of course I had every interest. I thought that was I still do. Even now, I think it's one of the best jobs you can have in the film industry, because it's, and in those days, there was no video playback. So as a camera operator, you're the only one who saw the shot. So you had to be trusted, and no one else would see the shot until the film was processed, which would be the following day. So if you said that's okay, you moved on. And if you're working abroad, I mean, very often it was 5 or 6 days before you saw rushes. So it's I must say, you did have a lot of sleepless nights, remembering the shot. And I say, because there was no playback then, so you're dealing with your own memory as opposed to now, or many years now. You just press a button and you see the whole shot played back. You can freeze a frame and, be confident it's either exactly what the director wanted or you go again, so that was, I say, quite a test of character in those days.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Did you encounter Stanley Kubrick at all? Did he leave any impression on you?
Yes, I mean, I met him, and then I met him later, because at one time I think it might have been Napoleon. I was up to maybe do a Napoleon, but of course it wasn't made anyway. And I had a meeting with him, and it was it's an interesting meeting, but I said to him, thank you for the offer, it's fantastic, but I don't think I really want to do it. And he was a bit shocked. He said, why is that? I said, well, because you basically do all the operation yourself or take over totally, And so I said, I would have no or very little input. And I said, I've been very lucky in my life. I've had quite a bit of input in films, whether good or bad, I don't know, but I have. And so he said, well, if I never look through the camera, will you do it? And I said, well, that's not going to happen. So you'll always look through the camera, and I wouldn't expect you not to. Anyway, I decided not to do it. And I think, it was quite a big decision, but I think it was the right decision for me, because I know the way afterwards, I met all the people that worked on the film, and very much Stanley was totally, but as he should, I'm not saying he shouldn't be, but there was probably no director ever that's been such a control person as he, he had to be in charge of everything, which is okay. He produced, he wrote it. It's his name that got the money. So I'm not criticizing it. Just I didn't really want to be part of it.
Yeah. And of course, you then became camera operator, beginning with Cromwell. Was that a good experience?
Cromwell, just one sec. Cromwell was great. Because it was it's very exciting. You had hundreds of stuntmen on horses, and of course Richard Harris was a total pain in the ass. He didn't. We started shooting in Spain to do all the big battle stuff. But either he lost confidence or lost his nerve, because he just refused to come to Spain. They even got him as far as the airport. I think it was in Alicante, northern Spain, near where we were working. And they said, we got him now, he's here. And he just got the next plane and left again, because he didn't feel that he could play the part, you know, which understandable, because an Irishman playing Cromwell who spent most of his life killing Irishmen is kind of understandable. But when he came out, he was good as gold. And I mean, the first day was nerve-wracking. When he eventually came after 2 or 3 weeks, we're doing a big scene out in the open plains, and I suddenly looked round and I realised everyone had gone. You know, the director, Jeff Hunt, they'd all gone back about 50 yards, and I was there with a camera right in front with Richard. And I thought, fuck you lot. Because Richard was quite angry. He often got angry. He was a terrible horseman at that time as well. So we always blamed the horse. And so I suddenly found myself very kind of exposed. And luckily we had an incredible Spanish stunt coordinator. I've forgotten his name now. He's married to an English lady. Really superb man, and great horseman. Richard wasn't a good horseman, and he attacked the horse, and the horses hated that. You know, they wanted someone. Horse likes it when you're in charge, but you know, digging in the spurs and all that doesn't help. And Richard said to the Spanish guy, he said, "This horse is a heap of shit. It can't do anything. Blah 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 blah." So let's call him Miguel for now. Miguel said, "Oh, maybe can I get on your horse?" And Richard said, "Yes." And he put a handkerchief down in front of the camera, Miguel, and he galloped off at about 150 yards, came at a camera at full gallop, put the horse down, picked up the handkerchief, the horse stood there, and he jumped back on the horse and rode off again. And he said to Richard, "I think the horse is better now, Richard." No, of course, Richard realised he'd been a total fool. The horse was amazingly well trained. I mean, just stood there after it fell, waiting for the whistle before it moved. You know? So I think Richard realised then that he couldn't get away with too much of the bullshit certainly with the Spanish stunt guys, you know, because they were wonderful horsemen, and also they had like orders. They had a great respect for the horse as well. They never ill-treated it, you know. So whereas people like Richard used to get angry with, I always say they're cruel to it, but they used to get angry, and the horse, I think, almost senses that, you know, that you've lost your temper, you're angry, you're digging your spurs in, and that doesn't go down too well with them. Anyway, it's my theory. Having never ridden a horse in my life, it might be a heap of shit.
I was wondering about the director, Ken Hughes, what he was like to work with.
Was he the young?
I'm just trying to think how old he was at that time. The reason why I ask is that he did the David Niven Casino Royale, and I find that quite a fascinating film. So
I try to think what part he played.
Oh, sorry, Ken Hughes. I was thinking of the director.
The director. Oh, the director. Sorry, you said actor.
Oh no, sorry. I meant to say director. Yes, sorry, director Ken Hughes. Yes,
I know Ken was fantastic. I'm not too sure Ken should ever have been a director. He's a wonderful character. He could easily get kind of waylaid, and so you do the big scene. I would say, remember we did the big scene with Alec Guinness, and Alec was playing the kid with the stutter. You know, it's very difficult because not to overdo the stutter. And he had quite a big scene. I think it was in the courtroom when he's wandering around and defended himself, knowing that he was actually going to be executed. At the end of the scene, Alex said to Ken, "How was I?" And Ken said, "Oh, you were great. You were great." He said, "How the fuck do you know? You never looked at me once. You were looking at the background the whole," which was true, because Ken used to look at the background and bollock the extras, and in the foreground, the actors, they're almost oblivious to him. You know? So Alec had sussed out that Ken wasn't watching him. He was watching how the extras were doing in the background. And as an actor, especially when you're doing this delicate part and the stutter is very difficult because it either works or it doesn't work, you know. And Alec had a lovely way about him, very kind of British, you know.
Mm.
It's almost like, but how do you know, old boy? Because you never fucking watched me once. And dear Ken went all over the place, you know. And
Mm.
but it was good. I mean, there's the difference between like, Alec Guinness and Richard Harris, so you couldn't have more different people, you know.
Mm.
But I think, yeah, I'm sure I think Richard had quite a respect for Alec Guinness, but I'm not too sure about Alec Guinness's respect for Richard, but you would never know it because he's, I say, so professional that
Mm. So this is Ken Hughes. What definitely wasn't an actor's director. He was more the took a picture of it, and he lost the
yeah,
actors perhaps a little
I
bit.
mean, you could not dislike him. And the Oscar Wilde film he did, I thought was yes, he did. He directed one of the Oscar Wilde films. There was two made, and it was, I thought, very good indeed. And it was always fun to be with.
Mm.
But very often after lunch, for some reason, which I won't go into, he would say, okay, now we'll do this shot. And I said, quiet, no, we did that shot before lunch, can you? No, we've got to do this shot of, and I should take away quietly and say, no, we've already shot that, you know, we shot that, the last shot before lunch. So I don't know what it was with him, whether it was a memory thing, but he would actually sometimes forget you shot something, even though you shot it like an hour earlier. And you had to, and I think in those days we didn't have playback, you know, we didn't have video, you couldn't just press a button and say, look, there it is. Luckily, the continuity, Maggie Onsworth was the best continuity girl in the country, and I've had a lovely kind of quiet way with her. And she said, and she would always say to her, oh, yes, Miss, we have shot it. We printed, you know, take 2, take 3, and take 5. You know. And he'd always believe her, as he should do. But it was always an experience with him.
I want to mention director Basil Dearden, if you remember Basil.
Basil, yeah, that was my first, as it were, big break. And Basil was a Pinewood rank director, you know, so he's under contract at Pinewood for many years, like quite a few directors were. And I wasn't involved in any of that. So when Jeff took me on to the film, on Assassination Pro, that would have been my first complete film as a camera operator. And Basil Dearden came out to me and said, called me over, come here, young man. I said, he said, you the operator? I said, yes. He said, but you're like, haven't really done it much, have you? I said, well, hardly any. He said, oh my God, he said, there goes my schedule. There goes, you know, I'll probably go over budget. And he made me feel really terrible because I thought, you know, so I thought, fuck you, you know, I'm going to get it right every time, which I basically did. Because I had very quick reactions, and it was quite a natural thing for me to operate. And also I made sure I knew the script backwards and upside down. So I never make suggestions that didn't work for the film, you know. And but you know, Basil was a bully, I guess, really, and I was warned by, I think it was a sound man who had worked with Basil a lot. He said, took me aside on the first day. He said, whatever you do, Peter, if you let him bully you, he will destroy you. He said, you have to stand up to him.
Right.
I said, well, stand up to a director. He said, you have to stand up to him if he's being unfair. And I did, you know, and he was right, you know, that when you stood up to him, not rude or angry, but when you stood up and said, no, that's not what we said. We said we do this or that. He would back down. And once he realized that you weren't going to be like scared of him, he backs away from you, and then you know, started bullying someone else, which who weren't as brave, so, or as silly, whatever. But it was good. All those things are a good experience, because I think every director you work with, well, like every human being, more or less, have a different approach, and so you have to the first few days or weeks, you really got to get into their head, the way they work, you know, because even if you don't agree with what they want or what they do, I always believe, you know, it is a director's film, you know, and unless I mean, I've worked with a few that are so dreadful, you really had to kind of change things that they said they wanted to make it better. But otherwise, you know, you have to go along with what they want, and mostly, you know, they're right, you know, and it's also, you know, it's a lovely experience, you know, when you work with someone like, say, John Boorman or someone like that too, you know. I think it's a wonderful director, a very strong character, and if you make a suggestion, you've got to be really sure it's good and it's better than maybe what he was going to do, you know. And so that's one of the challenges. I always enjoyed operating in that respect, because you felt you could add something, you know, and once you got trusted, you know, you were listened to.
And of course, on the Assassination Bureau, you also had Oliver Reed.
Yes.
What was Oliver like back then?
He was a total arsehole. He's no longer with. No, Oliver Reed was, the thing about Oliver Reed, he has a great presence on screen. I mean, he really, but he's a real bully, and he bullies little people, you know, and I hated that, you know. And so I think I realized early on I had to stand my ground with him, you know, stand up to him. And which I did, but which I think later when I met him, he kind of, I think he came to me and said, "Oh, I remember when we did that film, was Assassination." He said, I said, "You're a bit of an arsehole." He said, "Well, I wasn't going to say that." I said, "But you were." I said, "You bullied people, you made people feel uncomfortable, you made people feel nervous, because, you know, he has this great presence, you know." But you know, it's all part of learning, you know, when you can work with him one week and Alec Guinness is the nicest person in the world the following week, or James Cagney, the American actor, or any of these people, you know, they're all different. And I found mostly the women, the female stars, I don't think I remember one of those that was unappreciative. They all were very professional, you know, people like, you know, Barbara Streisand or Maggie Smith and Liza and Liv Ullmann. They all appreciated the crew and what you were trying to do, you know. But I say a few of the bullies were rather different.
Yeah. As you mentioned, James Cagney, what was he like?
Wonderful. He was, I mean, I never believed. In fact, I was offered Ragtime. I just finished a very tough film as second director and cameraman, and I really was worn out. And I got this call about would I go on to Ragtime, and I said no. I had to finish on a Friday and start that on a Monday. And they said, "Oh, it's James Cagney." I said, "I'll do it." I kind of grew up with that James Cagney and that, and I was so happy because he was exactly what I imagined he would be, you know, and he was so full of life. And I always remember his early films when he was, you know, dancing, and we got him dancing on the film a couple of times, so showing us things, you know, and he could still dance beautifully, you know. But also he's very, very appreciative and watched everything, you know. He knew what was going on all around him. He wasn't, I know he was getting on a bit then. He still was totally together. And I say, really, like a lot of those kind of older star, appreciated the crew and what they did and what they were doing, you know.
And before I leave the Assassination Bureau, Kurt Jürgen, I don't know if you remember Kurt Jürgens.
Just remind me, could you just
Well, I suppose most famously, Kurt was Stromberg in Spy Who Loved Me, who was one of the Bond villains.
Yeah.
So he appeared in an awful lot of a lot of things.
When did I work? I worked with him. I
I
can't.
think it's Assassination Bureau. I've got it down as.
Oh, maybe, but I don't think he had a very. I don't remember, so I don't think he had a very big part in it. But I guess I was so tied up with surviving Basil Dearden and Oliver Reed.
Yeah.
Whereas everyone, Dinah Rigg, they were all lovely, you know. But I don't remember this.
I mean, Diana Rigg. I mean, is she somebody that is very approachable, very nice to work with?
Yes, I mean she's extremely, totally professional. You know, I wouldn't say one of the greatest actresses, but she was totally professional. She knew exactly what the part should be, and very easy to work with. And like all those type of appreciated the crew. So she was great to work with. Yeah.
So skipping forward a little bit to Rambo First Blood Part 2.
Do we have to?
A little bit further. So I believe you were the helicopter directed photography on the helicopter scenes. How did Rambo sort of come into your life?
I was going to do a film in Africa, which I was very excited about because I was going to direct a lot of it. And so I was in England, packed up and ready to go. And I suddenly got a call saying, a little bit of bad news, Peter, that the film's been cancelled. So I said, well, I hope you never phone me with really bad news, you know. So I was sitting there with my case packed. I already spent some of the money that I was going to earn. And about an hour later, the phone went, and it was David Tomlin, who was the assistant director. And he said, what you doing? I said, nothing. He said, okay. He said, you come to, what was it, Mexico, I think it was, and direct the second unit. He said, I'm first assistant on the first. He said, but I don't want to hear any complaints, he said, because you're going to be working with some arseholes, especially the George Panscott Martyrs, who was the director. He said, so take it on, you get good money, but no whinging or moaning. You know, it's what it is, and just make the most of it you can. So, which I did. You know, we went there, and I was allowed to take, I think, 3 or 4 of my own crew from England, and all the rest were Mexican, who were fantastic. I'm not criticizing. The only less good people we had on it were some of the Americans we had, who talked a lot but didn't actually do too much. So, and also I realized, because I never, although they thought I'd never really done any helicopter work, you know, but I had to pretend I had to get the film. And of course, that's a whole scary situation. Could have been a few bad accidents with helicopters, and people have been killed in filming. And so I had to kind of assert myself a few times, with this kind of gung-ho attitude, which a couple of the pilots had. They'd been pilots in Vietnam, and I explained to them this wasn't Vietnam. We were making a film, and we don't aim to get anyone killed making a film. You know, although of course, unfortunately, on Rambo, we did have someone killed, but you do everything you can to safeguard people. And it's usually, as it was with this young man that died on the waterfall sequence, it's because they hadn't listened and hadn't concentrated on what we told everyone. And this poor guy slipped off the top of the waterfall after the shot and went all the way down. And it took us like an hour because he went right under the waterfall for them to get his body out. You know, of course, by then he's been dead. I mean, he's probably dead on the fall. But that was quite, not quite, it was amazingly upsetting. And it was even more upsetting that the couple of the producers, all they cared about was when he actually fell, were we shooting, which we weren't. We'd finished the shot, and the guy that slipped was on fire, what you just seen up the top of the waterfall. had anything caught fire. So we weren't shooting, but we just finished shooting, and that's all they cared about. They said, "Oh, that's great, great, move on." And I said, "But you know, I've just found out his wife. He was with his wife. His wife was with him, and they quite a few of the Americans had trailers, and they lived in this trailer park." And I said, "He's with his wife." I said, "Who's going to tell her?" You know, and then someone said, "Well," someone told me she was like 6 months pregnant. I thought, "Oh God, how much?" And they seem to have no interest at all in her welfare. And I must say, I was really angry, and I think I got a couple of the local people that spoke English and Spanish, and we went and found her. And by then she'd heard. In fact, when we found her, we heard a scream, and she'd found his body, which was in the back of a truck. You know, so that and she hadn't been up to then. She hadn't been told. So that was really a terrible experience. And you realize then, if you have bad producers, how dangerous it can be if you have producers that really have no value on the human life, and all they cared about was we weren't shooting, so they weren't responsible, so that was so after that once we learned what we were dealing with, we were very careful, and everything was written down, and if whatever shot we were doing was written down and explain, the degree of danger, what could go wrong, what we had to watch out for, and then we never had any more accidents, but that was a terrible experience, but the worst experience in some respects was the callousness of the not all of them, but a couple of these producers that really didn't seem to have any kind of human feeling at all about what had happened,
Yeah, it's awful, that, isn't it? And I mean, you never worked for Canon Films, I don't think, did you?
No, I think they had quite a bad
Because they were pretty bad.
Yeah. No, I think that Coralco was that was a really awful experience. But I think from that type of experience, you learn to what you've got to do is cover yourself, and also look after your crew, and everyone has to look after themselves, and so that's what we did, and when I used to do helicopter, I did a lot of helicopter. I would never take as few of the crew up with me as possible, just so we could work, because I thought what I don't need is like a Huey helicopter with like 6 or 7 technicians in it, when I can do 2 or 3 jobs and someone else can. So we used to cut the numbers down as much as possible, and also make all the people I used to take with me were people I'd known, many of them for decades, so they knew to obey the rules, not be stupid, and if I saw, like, often we had an American and they would be a bit gung-ho, and I would just chuck them off. I say, no, you go somewhere else. I'm not having you with me because you're too dangerous. I think they thought that we were kind of a bit wimpy, and it's nothing to do with wimpy. It's kind of, if you have 1 or 2 people that are careless, and it seems to catch on, so I certainly wouldn't accept that, and I made a few enemies, but I really didn't care too much about that. I just determined that we wouldn't have another accident and another death making a film, which was it is a film, if people don't die, shouldn't die making films,
No. And so how did that progress to actually directing the 3rd Rambo?
When the 3rd one came up, I was offered the 2nd unit again, and I'll be very honest, an extremely good salary, which at the time was very useful for me, and I took, I had some of my usual crew with me, And then we started shooting, and the first unit, people seemed to be, every time I saw the first unit, there seemed to be different faces. People were being sacked all over the place, you know. And the director, I've now, Ken Hughes, what's his name now? Oh dear. Anyway, I could see that he was very vulnerable, and I could see that almost certainly the producers were lining him up for the next one to sack, because they were making every excuse for why we'd be behind schedule, over budget. And I warned Ken, I said, you have to be careful there. You could, he said they'd never sack me. And of course, 4 days later, we finished night shoot, and producers came up to him. They said, "Oh, your car's there and your cases are in it." And he said, "What do you mean, Mike?" He said, they'd been to the hotel, they packed his clothes in the suitcases, put everything in this car, and the car went straight to the airport. And that was it. I mean, he was gone, you know. It was I must say, I never, and I'm looking around thinking, what the fuck is going on here? And then he said, "Okay, you take over." And I said, firstly, I said, "You don't tell me what I'm going to do in that respect." You know, I said, "I don't think I really want to take over." I said, because I have no great belief in the whole Rambo myth, to be quite honest. For me, it was a way of earning some quite good money. At which they surprised them. Anyway, they said, "Well, what could, if we add this money?" And I said, "No, it's nothing to do with money." I said, "Yeah, McKay." I said, it's the attitude, and the kind of stupidity of the character. So they said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, I think Rambo should have, first we should add a little bit of humor. It can't always be this kind of, hey, look at his muscles. And also a vulnerability." I said, because every film I've ever seen that is believable, the so-called hero has to have vulnerability. So they said, "Yeah, okay, yeah, we'll go along with that," And I think they went along with it till lunchtime the first day I was shooting. And then by then they said, no, we don't like this, making him vulnerable. He's got to be Rambo and nothing can ever go wrong. So I had the choice then of walking away from it. And they'd already warned me if I walked away, then they would close down for a few weeks and get rid of all the English crew and bring an American director over with an American crew. So I thought, well, it means I would be responsible for 5, 10, 15 people losing their job as well as me, So I stayed on with the understanding that I would be allowed to have some of my own way, not as much as I wished for, but in a way of vulnerability, and that I was allowed to getting the humor in was almost an impossibility, because sly and humor don't go down well together. So I got the vulnerability but very little. I wanted a little slight tongue-in-cheek humor, but that was never forthcoming.
So was Sylvester Stallone quite open to ideas, or was it how was he kind of to work as an actor?
No, we got on quite. I mean, I did 3 films with him eventually, the 2 Rambos and then Tango and Cash. So I think you could. I mean, you have to understand that basically, I'm the last person in the world to suggest what Rambo is, because I'm the least person in the world that's like Rambo. But he invented the character, he wrote the character. So you have to let them have a lot of their own headway, because they know the character. I don't know. I find it at times quite laughable, these type of heroes. And Sly was a good writer. I think he'd written some good stuff, and he was appreciative that I was honest about, I wasn't happy about this, but I would listen to him, and And sometimes we had to do things, two different ways, just to make us both happy. But in the end result, when it came to the editing, because I wasn't big enough director that I had the final cut. So even though I had my own edit, after that I'd finished, a lot of stuff I'd thrown out, not a lot, but some stuff I'd thrown out, which I thought was over the top, was put back in again. But then I got angry at the time. Then I thought, well, these people know their audience much more than I do. They do know their audience, and they know what their audience expect and demand. So I grew up a little bit and realized that you can fight up to a point, unless you're really top director. But if the main actor, writer, producers all want something else, you're almost certainly going to either walk away, or you try and compromise between what you want and what they want.
Do you remember working with Jerry Goldsmith on the score?
Yeah, yes, it was. That to me was almost the biggest joy of the film, because he is a charming man, a very obviously very talented man. And he came to, after I finished in the editing, I met him, and he started talking about music, and I said, whoa. I said, I've that's your life, music. You've done it on so many films. You must do what you feel is right for the film, and I totally trust your judgment and taste. Whereas Sly came in one day and said, "I've been thinking, Jerry, if we do this instead of that," and Jerry just looked at him. He said, "We either do it the way I've got it, or you do it. I'm not going to." And slide back down immediately, because Jerry was in such a position he could just walk away and start another film the following day. So it was quite it was a real pleasure, because early on we just did it, just him playing the piano, and we put the scenes up, and he would watch the scenes and just play the piano. Or later, obviously, it was going to be orchestrated, for 20, 30 musicians. But it was really wonderful watching someone like that. It's like the old-fashioned cinema, with a pianist playing in front of the old black and white silent film show. And you could tell, even by just on the piano, the emotion he's put into it, the excitement. And then when you have the full orchestra, which we recorded in England, because he said that's where he wanted to do it. And he said, you had the best session people in the world here anyway. And that was an incredible experience, because all these musicians come in that morning, like 25, 30 of them, and all chatting away. And they're given the music. It's the first time they've seen the music. And about 15, 20 minutes later, conductor John Williams gets up there, and they're playing the music, And you think, it's not like hours and hours of rehearsing. They're so professional that they read it, they understand it. The screen's up there with the scene on there. And it was probably the best experience of the film for me, just to work with him and work with these musicians. It really was fun to do, and also an eye-opener, because I'd never been involved in that side of filming before.
I think Jerry Goldsmith is one of my favorite composers. I'm glad it was a good experience.
Oh, and also a lovely man. I mean, a really nice man as well. And quite strong. I mean, he wouldn't take crap from anyone, which I also liked.
Good for him. Another highlight, Empire Strikes Back. You were a location unit director on that one. What was it like on the Star Wars film?
I did what they called the Norwegian shoot, which is all the stuff, the opening sequences in the snow, which was really very, very tough, because it was I think it was had to be in the film, it was the coldest winter they'd had in 60 years or something, So it's very often 30, 40 below. And Erwin Kirshner was first unit, and he was really good, nice, a very nice man, and easy, pleasant to work with, and we got on very well. And the first unit came to Norway for probably a week, 10 days, just to set the scene. And then they went back and they left me with my crew to do all the major scenes in the snow. And it was, for me, it was like, I couldn't believe it, because it was my biggest experience as a director, I think as a director, and in very tough, very tough. I mean, when you're working, when it's that cold, I mean, it really, you watch. One day I was watching the crew, and they were working like in slow motion, and I said to the production manager, "What's wrong?" I said, "No, maybe they're all staying up too late and drinking too much." He said, "No, but it's 40 below, Peter." He said, "It's hypothermia setting in. You know, the whole body now is slowing down." And he said, "We have to wrap now, because it's human beings are not supposed to work in these conditions." So I learned a lot then, and we had the best equipment, money could buy in the way of clothing, but the cold, once the cold gets into you, it really is debilitating. It really does makes it very hard to think. Then your nose freezes up and you can hardly breathe. So I must say it was a joy every night getting back to this not very great hotel we stayed in on the mountains, and stand in a shower for about 15-20 minutes and just slowly thaw out, and but I say it was a good experience. And I think the studio were happy with. In fact, there was a bit of criticism, and George Lucas saw the footage and he said, "Leave him alone." He said, "That's exactly what I want, what Peter's shooting, his crew, that's exactly," because a couple of people, lesser kind of producers, were giving me advice, and I thought this wasn't good advice. Anyway, luckily George heard that, and he said, "No, you just stay exactly as you are. You shoot as you're doing, and if I have any problems, I just call you." He said, "I don't have to go through other people. I'm the boss," which of course he was the boss, and so that made it much easier. And once that was clear, no one came near me then, because once they knew I only dealt with George, then you're left alone, because they want to keep their job.
Yeah, I think that was quite interesting about the original Star Wars sequels, was that although George Lucas had another director come in, it was very much George's vision, and the director was kind of the one that did all the heavy lifting, but it was George who had the overall control over the film.
Yes.
Did you have the principals with you in Norway, Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford?
Yes, for the first when the first unit went back, I was left. Mark was left with me for about a week shooting. I think Harrison Ford only for a couple of days, which is probably lucky, because he was in a very strange place at the time. A lot of drinking going on. Whereas Mark as good as gold. I mean, I think he understood he's very, very lucky to be where he was, because he's, I think, not one of the greatest actors in the world, but he was perfect for that part, So he was no problem at all. And so it was a good, my memory of it, apart from freezing cold, it was mostly a good memory.
Because I think they did have some days where they couldn't even shoot. It was so cold, and they just had to sort of,
Well, when it got terrible, I mean, I would, because we had these locations. We sometimes have to go an hour in a snow cat up to a mountain and and suddenly in the blizzard, you stand outside the hotel and all you can see is white. So I said, well, this is fucking stupid. We're driving an hour uphill and down dale and that. we could actually almost poke the cameras sometimes out of the window of the hotel and shoot sequences. You know, 'cause it was once snow, fog, you know, and so we did quite a few, made life a little easier. I mean, we did do some of the, you know, the bigger vistas, you know, because when you, the top of the mountain was one or two locations that were just unbelievable magic, you know, and you couldn't shoot in too heavy snow because you wanted to see, otherwise you could do everything in a bloody studio, you know. So it was trying to get the right balance so you could look cold, which it was, look foggy, which it was, and snowy, but you could still have a bit of depth to it, you know.
Moving on to another classic of yours, Labyrinth. Was that fun?
Yeah, it's funny because I never really think about, I don't know why, I never really think too much about Labyrinth. I mean, I worked on it for, I guess, 20 odd weeks or maybe more, you know. And it was fun to do, and you know, we were given quite a few sequences to shoot. I just somehow didn't believe in the actual whole. I didn't think it was done very well, to be honest, but then of course it made a fortune. So once again, my judgment was wrong again. But I say it was, I had my own crew, had my own you know, sequences to shoot. So mostly good thoughts on it.
Was Jim Henson quite a good director?
Jim was so very, very easy to work with. He was a charming, really charming man. The only thing, of course, was the character he was famous for. He talks like who's the TV stuff he did.
Oh, the Muppets.
Yeah, I mean, he actually talks like that, so you feel you're dealing with Muppets and stuff like that. But no, he was easy to work with, nice man, appreciative. And I said, I don't have any bad memories at all about working on it. You know, with him, he was good as gold. Jim.
I mean, when you're working with that level of fantasy and lots of puppets and the technical aspects, does it make it? Is it interesting on one hand, but also very difficult?
It's very, very difficult because so many the puppeteers. I mean, we had a couple of star puppeteers came over from America, and they were real pains in the ass. You know, they were like you'd expect, like you're dealing with a super actor star, you know, and all they're doing, and they're basically talking to their hand most of the time. And I had a lot of trouble when they were stroppy. I had a lot of trouble keeping my temper with them, and I had a bit of a bollocking from the first unit director and producer. They said, you have to listen to them, you know, even though they might be wrong, you know, because I said, well, you know, I'm getting told what to do by someone that's made his living talking to his hand, you know, and I couldn't quite, but that didn't go down too well because they're puppeteers. I said, okay, I would do my best to be polite.
And you also had some actors, some just little people, wasn't it, in costumes as well with the puppets, I believe.
Yeah, well, I did 2 or 3 films with the little people, and they were tremendous. I mean, considering, you know, what it must be, you can't imagine what it must be like to be, you know, what, 2'6", whatever it is. You know? And they were really wonderful, and they had great enthusiasm, great energy. And the only problem I had a couple of times, they were quite randy, some of these little people. And I said, where's half? I can't find half the people. And I said, no, we know where they are. We have to, because they were round the back there being naughty. So, which I thought was quite funny because why not? You don't have to be over 3 foot tall to want to have a bit of sex. So, so that was okay. I enjoyed most of that.
And did you encounter the principals, David Bowie and Jennifer Connelly? Were they around?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, Bowie was I worked with a few times. He was wonderful.
Hmm.
He's one of those actors. He just said, basically, tell me what you want, and that's what I do. He wanted to, because sometimes you think you're dealing with these really big actors. That how can you tell them as a second unit director what you want and what they should be doing? But he made it clear that he wanted as much guidance as possible, and if he had any problem, we would talk it through. And if we couldn't make up our mind, you just go to the first unit director and say, no, this is two examples of what we can do. Which would you prefer? So let him make the ultimate decision. But it was, I have to say that mostly very good memories of that film.
Oh, good, yeah. Because Jennifer Connelly, of course, recently, Top Gun Maverick, of course, that's a huge film she's been in. But of course, she was very young and sort of fresh to the business at that point, wasn't she?
Yeah, no, I didn't do too much with her, but she was good as gold as far as my memory of her. She wasn't like because sometimes they can, especially a young American actor, can be a little bit stroppy, but no, they were all very good indeed.
Wonderful. I must mention Tim Burton's Batman. Of course, a fantastic, just like Superman the movie, the definitive Batman film, I think for most people. Again, what was it like encountering another superhero?
Oh, that was great. I mean, Keaton was, I think he didn't really believe he should be Batman. I never found that he was that believable, and but Tim was lovely. He was having a hard time from John Peters and the studio, and he wasn't used to that. And so I had to kind of guide him through some of the stuff, saying you have to stand your ground. If it's your name up there, it's your talent they've employed. Just because John Peters says something or someone else says something, it doesn't mean they're right. I said you have to listen to them, and I said sometimes you probably even have to do things two ways, but you must put your stamp on it. Which he did. Because at that time he was quite. I mean, obviously after that he became one of the world's top directors. But at the time, it was a new experience for him, and you can be bullied, by the studio, and especially people like John, who I must say I like a lot, but he doesn't always think before he talks.
And of course, you got a fantastic cast again of Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
Would you have had much to do with them?
Yeah, I had quite a bit to do. Yeah, and I'd like to have done more with Nicholson, because I just found him I find him one of the fantastic actors. I did quite a bit with Keaton. Keaton's quite a serious guy, which is not a problem, but it's always nice when you can work with someone that have a bit of humor about, or maybe that's an English thing. I always find it nice if you have someone that has a bit of humor, so you can bounce off each other. But I say it all worked, I think, quite well. And the thing about with Batman, I mean, I just wonder if you actually got on to analyze it, probably a quarter of the film isn't, it's a double, because you get away with murder. And also, I mean, with Keaton, that costume is very, very tough to wear. I mean, they got better as the films progressed, but to start with, you could hardly move in it. The designers are made this thing look great, but hadn't given any concession for the actor, especially someone that's not amazingly strong. I mean, the double I got for Batman, for my stuff, was a top martial art guy. I mean, he was so unbelievably fit, And he said at the end of a few hours, he said, you've totally worn out, And so we had to persuade the costume people, to think about the actor or the double as well as what it looks like, you know, because it's all right making something, but if you can't move in it, you know, it's all a bit of a waste of time.
Yeah, yeah. Did you have any favorite moments from working on Batman? Any specific sequences that you were involved with that you particularly enjoyed?
Yeah, I enjoyed I'm trying to think now, the tower, the bell tower, that was
Oh,
quite,
yeah, at the
that
end,
was
yeah.
quite fun, because I remember we shot that over the Christmas holiday, and I was left alone because most of the people had gone back to America for Christmas, but they needed to. They suddenly realized they had to shoot this, so I shot most of that sequence on my own, and so that was quite a good challenge, and also it worked very well, you know. So, but most of my memories were good memories, and I say I had which is always lovely if you have the crew you're used to, which I did. I had my own crew. So if you're having a bad day sometimes and things aren't quite working out, you know, it's always nice to be surrounded by friends and people you've known for many years, you know, who can boost you up, and because everyone thinks, I always say, a director should better always be perfect. A director should know what he's doing. You never think a director can be tired or doubtful about what he was shooting. You know, you always believe a director, is on top of it. You know, and I certainly wasn't. And I realized, most directors have bad days. You know, and even the very big people, have a bad day sometimes. You know. And sometimes it's because, the night before they've been in the studio, been on the phone to them about their over budget, that's wrong and this is wrong, and I've had that, when suddenly you work 12, 14 hours, you go to get to the hotel, go to sleep, and at 1 o'clock in the morning, the phone goes and you've got a call from Los Angeles telling you what you fucked up, and, and then you lay awake all night, both angry and thinking, how can you, get it better, so, but I say, it's still, I can't imagine doing anything else. It's a very exciting way of living and working.
I just want to mention Anton First, the production designer. Whether you recall him at all?
Oh, very much so. I think Company of Wolves was the first time I worked with him. Do you know Company of Wolves? The film? Yep.
Sorry, could you repeat that? Sorry, Peter?
Company of Wolves.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. That's the first time he and I worked together, and I was directing the second unit, and I had a huge amount of work to do. And Anton was once he saw what we were shooting, and he knew that I think I was probably more tuned into his vision than the first unit were. So we got on very well. And after that, we spent quite a bit of time together. And of course, we were going to do a film, I'm trying to think what it was now, in Los Angeles. We're going to do a film together, which he was going to produce and I was going to direct. And that's when, he died, and that was a terrible tragedy, because, there was, I think, drugs involved and medication, and he got a doctor giving him one medication, someone else giving him another, so it's a terrible tragedy, what happened,
You do hear that quite a lot in Hollywood, unfortunately, that kind of sort of easy to get the medications and nobody's questioning it and so on. But then, of course, you went back to Batman and Robin. I imagine quite a dramatically different experience, that one.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. That's where he shot in the States,
the States, that one,
with Joel Schumacher. Was it Schumacher? Yes, it was, because Joel is bigger than life, very loud, about 6'6", very loud. I didn't think, personally, I don't think he really should have been doing the film. I don't think he had that much interest or love for it. But it was worked well for me because it meant I was given quite a few complete sequences to shoot, and he and I got on okay, and of course the studio knew me from other films, so I got quite a bit of support and backing,
You mentioned stunt doubles. Arnold Schwarzenegger had a very, very good stunt double, pretty much could almost do close-ups as
Yes.
Arnold. So that was pretty amazing, really, once you sort of start looking for him.
Oh no, no, you're right. He, especially when the way he was Frost, whatever it's called, with all the makeup, you get away with murder, but I mean, Arnie was also very, very. I was terrified, because he had one of the biggest stars in the world. Once again, he was just lovely. He said, I won't try and do his voice, but it was like, you tell me what to do, I do it. If I don't understand, I ask you again, but you must be patient with me, I thought, I'll be patient with you. So, so he was okay to work with. He was fun to work with. And I say so much of it, I could, we would do it scenes with him, and I could go back the following day with the double and fill in anything I thought, because not many actors can physically do what a stunt guy can, So I could go back and fill in with the double, the stunt guy, So so that was good. And I say he was. I found very appreciative, very polite, good for the crew, Unlike a few actors that are total arseholes, he was really very pleasant.
Yeah. And did you find George Clooney sort of was quite comfortable?
Oh,
in that suit?
George was lovely. I mean, he's exactly what you would think when you look at him and you think he looks like he's a really nice, fun person, and that's exactly what he is. He used to challenge me with dialogue. In the morning sometimes he's trying to be amusing or funny, and I say to him, George, you can challenge me about looks because you're better looking than me, you're taller than me, you're richer than me, you have more talent than I had. I said, but never take me on for dialogue. I said, because I will annihilate you. But he never learned. And so every day he'd come on with rehearsing something that he would thought would get me going, and I would whip his ass a bit about it, and he'd go, I said, I did tell you, George, you stick to acting. But I said we had a really pleasant, very pleasant relationship, and I had a great admiration for him, not only as an actor but as a person. I thought he was, and the crew, and also I always judge, if the way they treat the crew, people like George treat the crew wonderfully, And I've always found the ones that really are not very nice for the crew also are not very good actors, to be quite honest. They have to prove, they're the boss, and I hate that,
Yeah. How was Uma Thurman then? Again, a big name at the time. How is she?
I did very little with her. I did a couple of sequences with her, and she was very, very, very good indeed. She's very, very professional. Once again, she just wanted to know exactly what she was needed to do, and some of it was very complicated, I seem to remember. And you explain why I can do this with you, that I can do with a double if it's too much, and so it was quite easy to work with her, and also quite pleasant. She was never like a big star thing. She never did the big actress stuff,
Do you have a couple of favorite sequences from that film that stay with you?
No, it's kind of, I don't know. It's kind of, it's so many things happen. Nothing really sticks out in my mind about one situation that was. I mean, every day was some sort of drama or some difficulty, but I think you just I think probably enjoy the challenge, to be quite honest. Sometimes it's quite frustrating, but I just I enjoyed it. I was in a very, very good position with the studio, and really anything I needed, I got without any arguing. I mean, because once John Peters, got behind me, that was it. You only had to say, "This is what I need for this sequence," and if the production went, "Oh," and I just called John and said, "John, because I'd already talked through with John and the other producers and showed them storyboards. I said, I'm having a little bit of trouble getting, the money at the time to shoot the sequence the way we storyboarded it." And they would just get on the phone and say, we want it the way it is, we want it the way the storyboard is. And that was the end of the conversation. And I mean, I understand the production manager has to be responsible. You can't just hand out, which is hundreds of thousands of dollars. They can't but I think hopefully anyway, I was always very careful about money, because I always, have been brought up on smaller stuff. When you deal with these huge budgets, they're quite terrifying. So I was always respectful, and also because I always worked very, very fast and with quite a small crew compared to most people. I not only bought things on time or even under time, but also usually under budget.
Yeah, I think Batman and Robin is one of those sort of guilty pleasures. I think for a lot of people, it's very much a sort of so colourful. It's like a comic book brought to life, and I think it's one of those films you can just very easily watch again and again. So I think it's but whether people admit they'll watch it, I don't know. But,
no, that was kind of what we were, to make it that type of. So it didn't have to be. Because a lot of times you think a film has to be totally believable. Of course, we're allowed to bend the rules quite a bit on that.
Oh yeah, it's very stylistic. You did obviously work on 3 Harry Potter films. I was curious just to see how they kind of evolved. Whether as you sort of from one to another, I suppose they got more efficient and so forth.
Yes, I think the first one was with Chris was fairly chaotic, and I came in. I can't tell how long they've been shooting. That they'd had a director before me, a second director, but I think things hadn't worked out, and then I was called in, and I had a good relationship with Chris. He after at first he was a bit worried about me, and then once he realized that he could trust you, and a couple of times when producers said, "No, you can't have this, you can't have that," and I stood up to them more than he did in that respect, saying, "No, we need this to make this work." And once he, which I understand, once he got the trust, because if it's your name up there, Chris Columbus, producer, director, writer, even though maybe a third of the film is shot by a second unit, no one knows that, So they have to. I mean, there's a lot of trust to put in people, and it doesn't always work out, I must admit. But I think it did then. I think it was, and I say he was a pleasant person to work with.
And any 1 or 2 standout moments from Harry Potter that you enjoyed or really stick out?
I don't know. It's such a. I mean, I loved the work. I guess like a kid, I loved. I mean, you're given the steam train to work with, and all that type of thing. Up in Scotland. So that was a lovely experience. That you were in charge of. You had your own steam train and going over the viaduct and shooting with helicopters, and so all that was good fun to do. I don't think there's any one thing that stands out. It was basically, for me, a very pleasant experience, and also it was also nice being trusted. That I hardly ever had to argue about things. If I needed it, you got it. So in other words, you're quite spoiled. Because next film you do, you have to argue about everything. But and also I think they knew they're on. Well, they didn't know they're on a winner. The money was going to be pouring in, but that doesn't always mean they want to spend it.
Oh yeah. Did it matter which studios you kind of worked in? Did you have a favorite studio like Leavesden or Pinewood? Was there somewhere you considered to be special?
Studio, not the company. I mean, I loved Shepherd. I mean, Pinewood, I never really, because Pinewood, when I was first started, was rank, and it was all people under contract, and it was no one ever seemed to want to take any chances or do anything extra. Whereas Shepperton was always a place where big films were made, but they were all freelance films. People were brought in to shoot the film, and that was the end of it. And it was also something I must say I've always enjoyed working at Shepperton. It's always for me my favourite studio. Not necessarily the best equipped. I mean, Pinewood had, especially now, they spent so much money on it. It has everything you could wish for, but there's something about Shepperton I always enjoyed, and the crews were mostly local people, that worked in the film industry for decades, so that was all. I guess with very little bullshit. It was quite fun to be there,
And just to wrap up, Peter, I just wanted to ask you about Guardians of the Galaxy and working with James Gunn, of course, a very big name at the moment.
Yeah, that was he wasn't a big name then. I think he's just starting to become big. It was I don't have too many memories about Guardians of the Galaxy. I did a lot of shooting on it, but I don't know. It never. I'm totally wrong, and I thought this will never catch on. No one's going to watch this. Wrong. So it was fun to do, and I said my unit did a lot of shooting, and the director was very easy to approach. You can talk through things with him, which you can't always. Situation if you have other ideas, you could put it to him, and it's up to him say yes or no, or just do half of this and half of that. So I have mostly good memories of it.
I suppose very technical, because unlike a lot of other films you worked on, a lot of it wasn't there. It was put in afterwards. Did that make it more complex?
Yeah, that's always difficult, but in many ways it's more difficult for the actors than anyone else, because you put some poor actor in front of a green or blue screen and tell them that, oh, by the way, behind you the whole world's blowing up, or this is, and it's very, very hard, and you have people, other special effects and that, all dressed up totally in green or blue against the screen so they can move things around, and I found very hard that the actors are so good, because it's not like acting like you would on a stage or a normal scene. You really got to imagine so much and make it seem real. So I must say I have I probably always have had, but I have a great admiration for the acting and the actors, because I know some can be a little bit of a pain, but when you have to kind of bare your soul almost every day, and not always be appreciated, it's very difficult. But I've had lovely experiences with actors, and very, very few have I not enjoyed working with. And I won't mention them. Oliver Reed.
Do you have a favorite actor, Peter?
I don't know about favorite, but I loved when I worked with James Cagney, because he's like someone I grew up with, watched all those early films when he was dancing and that, and then he was a great villain. And of course, he's the sweetest man in the world. And working with him was really, in fact, I wasn't going to do the film because I just finished a very tough film, and I got this call about working on it. And then they said, oh, James Cagney's in it, Donald O'Connor. I said, I'll do it. I thought, well, you're working with these two great people with amazing history, and it was wonderful, you know. And I say, you know, Cagney was I mean, he's quite late in his life, and he had I think a heart attack. So, but he still had that twinkle in his eye, and he was very appreciative, and a really nice, pleasant experience to work with someone like that, you know.
We didn't talk about Wolverine.
Good. My penultimate question was just about Rogue One, because you're credited as doing some additional shooting on that. I don't know what the nature of that was on Rogue One.
Rogue One, what is that? That's
Yeah, the Star Wars prequel, Rogue One.
Madeline, did I?
Which one is that? What year is that?
That was 2016, I think.
No, Peter interviewed for the job, and then the guy said, "No, you'll show me up." He didn't work on that. Did
No.
he get credit for it?
I didn't get any money, so
You should talk about Wolverine and Hugh Jackman.
are you taking over now? She's
Oh,
taking
it's just you love Hugh Jackman.
I love Hugh Jackman. Okay.
Well, who doesn't? Yes.
Not sexually, but
But it's also that you came a second unit director. They put the director in the editing room, and you did most of the film. I don't know if you're allowed to say that.
no, I'm not allowed to say that. I'm not going to. No, Hugh was tremendous to work with. You know, he's I mean, he's a bit of a problem because he's 6'2", very good looking and very bright. But apart from that, it was great to work with. And
Yeah, he seems like somebody that was always very down to earth despite his
Although
success, and he was.
and also is one of those lovely people. Not only is he good at what he does, he appreciates people, you know, and yeah, and also amazing when you. I don't know if you see. Did you ever see Oklahoma when he did Oklahoma? I mean, he was fantastic in that, you know.
Yeah. And I did actually talk about comic book movies. When we talked about Superman 1, we didn't talk too much about Superman 2. Was there anything that was in your scenes of Superman 2 that you particularly remember? For example, the prison escape, or part of the Metropolis battle, a few bits Dick Donner film. Was there anything from 2 specifically that was good to do
On Superman?
Yeah, so the stuff that went into Superman 2.
I don't think so. It's because we did so much of it. In fact, at one time, the producers suddenly realized that we shot more of number 2 than we had of number 1.
Yeah,
and which we all knew as a crew, but they hadn't kind of concentrated. So there's a real panic then to finish number 1, because we had to then. So there's much more work to do than there should have been, because, you know, the way it was scheduled, a lot of number 2 had been shot, you know. But once again, I think that most of the time, I have, you know, fairly positive memories and thoughts about it.
I mean, did you see the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2?
Just 1 second.
Oh, sorry.
The way they treated Dick Donner, you do not have fond memories of Superman.
I do. I have fond memories of it. I'm not happy with the way they treated, you know, Dick Donner, but that's I had no control of that, you know.
Did you see the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2 when it came out? Were you interested to see what his version kind of was like?
Yes, in fact, I think I got it. Yes, we got both the.
We went 2 weeks ago.
We got both. Are you going to? Why don't you take over? Because you'll drive me crazy.
But a month ago, we saw the Dick Donner version.
Yes, but I'd already seen it.
Yes, and we went to Royal Albert Hall.
We've.
And we're going to the Disney Hall next winter.
Okay, I'm not throwing my voice. This is my ex-wife chatting away in the background. So I keep forgetting what I've been asked because you interrupt so much. What was the question? Sorry.
What were your thoughts on seeing the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, the thing is, I really have so much admiration for Dick as a person and as a director. And I, knowing what he went through
Hmm.
on the film, you know, and he wasn't well supported by producers. And he always kept a good humor, and also always appreciated the crew. He always appreciated what was, you know, done for him, or any ideas, and was also fun to be with. I mean, Dick is what was a fun person. I mean, he was. If someone said to you, or you could have a meal with Dick Donner tonight, you think, whereas you think great, was a lot of people in this industry, the directors say, oh, you're having a meal with, so I thought, oh fuck, you know. But with Dick, you knew it'd always be fun. And I say he was very, very he appreciated what people did for him. He kept people like, you know, David Tomlin, the AD, on 3 or 4 films. I mean, he kept as many of the crew together as he could, you know.
And it was Gareth Edwards who did Rogue One, the director. If that rings a bell or not. I was going to just sort of ask to finish off. What was there? Of all the projects you've mentioned, is there a favorite project in your career that we haven't mentioned? Do you have like an all-time favorite?
Well, I think my favorite film I worked on was Cabaret with Bob Fosse, because I just firstly it was, you know, ended up amazingly successful and appreciated by, you know, got a lot of awards. But when we were making it, the producers hated it, and they hated Bob, and they wanted to get rid of Bob at times, you know. So that made it, even when it became successful in every respect, it seemed to make it all worthwhile. That, you know, you as a crew believed in Bob. You know, everyone loved him, apart from the fucking couple of these producers, you know, who did all they could to destroy him. And, you know, and Bob was a strong person, but it's still, you got to, you know, you do a day's work, 14 hours, you go back to the hotel, and at 12 o'clock at night, you get the phone going, you got the producers from America or wherever, another country, telling you what a heap of shit it is and how you're going over budget, and no one. And what they said to us one day, they said, this is not releasable. We've accepted now this film could never be released theatrically. We'll probably do it on the planes and that type of thing. But as far as the, you know, theatrical release, this is, you know, a film that then wins what, 7 or 8 awards, and most people appreciated it as one of the best kind of musicals with a great story that ever was made. You know, so it's I learned to feel quite a lot of respect for directors during those periods, because you don't realize until later in your own life what happens after you finish the day's work, you know. And when you're tired and just want to go to sleep, and then the phone goes, and you get these people that don't really know that much, but have the power because of they have the money in their hands, you know, to influence things. So and all in all, I mean, it's I can't imagine any better way of having a career, for me anyway, to work in this industry, because it's, as you have so many different levels of, you know, creativity, and sometimes a bit of danger and rewards, and meeting wonderful talent, you know, and you meet, like say, working with, say, Ingrid Bergman, you know, someone that you kind of grew up in awe of, you know, suddenly you're working with them and they're just lovely, lovely people, you know. It's and also very often quite unsure of themselves, you know. Like you think these type of big actors, they would know nothing should worry them, but of course they do worry, and they are unsure, and you understand why. You know, as you get older and more mature yourself, you know, if you're out there every day standing in front of a camera, you're exposing yourself to millions of people, you know, it's quite a tough way of making a living. I mean, when you do it properly, I'm not talking about some of the kind of kind of action type stars, but I mean, when you really are a proper actor, then so it's no, I mean, I must say I do miss it greatly, but I don't miss getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, but I do miss the
Would anything ever tempt you back, or if something really fantastic, or you just kind of very
no,
happy just to be?
I think by now, I think I would go back if it meant helping someone who was actually, someone I knew and wanted me to, just be there quietly in the background, if that's what someone wanted. But to actually take on a film and have all the worries that go with it, be up at 6 o'clock every morning, back at 9 o'clock at night. No, been there, done that as well.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Well, thank you very much, Peter, for spending so much lovely time talking to me. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to make before we go?
I wish I was 20 years younger. Apart from that, life's good.
Well, don't we all? But yeah. And,
Again.
and happy birthday, of course, for tomorrow. I hope you have a lovely day.
Oh my God. Okay, thank you very much indeed.
That's right. Take care, Peter. Nice to see you.
Speak soon, I'm sure. Okay.
Will do.
Bye
Bye,
then.
Peter.
I'll close down that.